At what point, I guess, in your relationship with Hunter did it get romantic?
I would say probably it wasn't long after I started because, like I said, we had been close friends. So I think that there was that tension there where when he was home, we were together all the time, and it became separate from a wrestling interest. But at the same time, we never discussed it, and neither one of us wanted to talk about it because,
Right.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Right.
Sure, he wasn't going to bring it up, but, if you're hanging out on, cuddling with a buddy watching TV, you know what I mean? I know, and I didn't want anything to interfere with his job or my job, whatever that may or may not be, and so I think we're both conscious of that. So then when I got the job, it was even more so, but then we were together 24 hours a day, basically, because then we were working, traveling, and...
Did you have to hide it from the boys and stuff like that, or...?
We did. I never said anything, and he specifically, that's when a lot of very hurtful things happened. There would be, groupies that would show up in certain towns, and I would, sit there and gulp, or, go into the bathroom and throw out my food if I had to sit down at a table with, or if the boys would say, oh, no, don't worry, she's a dyke, or, and it would just kill me, but, so to answer your question, it was probably about 4 months after I had started, and kept it secret for a good half a year after that. And we were actually then living together in New Hampshire. I still had my own place, but I was basically living with him, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, things had changed in my career, and I knew I was there, and I knew whatever, and that I was always professional enough to know that if anything would happen between the two of us, I would still, it happens.
Right.
What are you going to do? And so I gave him an ultimatum, and I said, I can't do this. It's affecting me. We're together, we're not. And I left his house, but we continued to work, and then he professed shortly thereafter, and it was just a known thing. And
the office was cool with it after he came out?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, it was great. I think that, it helped both of our careers. It helped, he would say to me so many times, I'm so glad you're with me. And I would say, I'm so glad too, I'm just so glad we have each other in this environment and in this world.
Right. I guess
it was, just for the record.
On the road, was it hard to stay in shape and be on the road at the same time, and how did you maintain your look?
Well, was it hard to stay in shape? No, because that was was it hard to be that shape?
Well,
yes.
You kind of changed your look, kind of. You went from bodybuilder look to being kind of more fit at one point. So, I mean, how did you...
Yeah, that we butted heads on my look a lot because, as we know, I became a certain way, looked a certain way in my actions and physically to be able to work, to be, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions too. Is like you went from pretty much non-speaking, and they pretty much gave you a role where you had more personality and stuff like that.
Sure, I mean an intimidation factor, and that had to be that way. Otherwise, it would never have happened. But inside, then there's that line between reality and not what is real. What am I saying? What's real and what's not real. Because of the way that I looked and the persona that I played on TV, I really did look like that in real life. I couldn't go home and take the muscles off, and that's not really the person that was inside or wanted to be. But I knew that I had to look like that, be that way physically to perform my job, and look like that for intimidation factor to make it work. But and I worked. I mean, I had my diet. I read everything I could. I had every supplement and just carried around in coolers. I would set my alarm at 3 a.m. to eat a yogurt or certain grams of protein, or I knew I would give the guys diets and work them out, and they would go, forget it. I don't do that. You do it, you know, and I would, and I did. But then there became a certain time where I just wasn't comfortable, and so I started doing it on my own, and I would get it's a little bit too, we need you to dress more like this, or, don't put your hair back, or, cut
Right.
your hair, or something, and I started not doing that. I just went the opposite direction, and it took, and the office was not happy about that. They didn't want that, and I will. In the meantime, personally, I think I was feeling better. I was feeling better the more feminine I became, and the more me. Because if anybody knows me too, they know like I'm the total cornball. I'm very intelligent, but can be quite a flake, and goofy and silly and very sensitive, and all those guys knew that about me, backstage, and there were sides of them that the public will never see that I shared with them, but I guess it was just time for that to happen, and I did it naturally. And then of course we know how sometimes something picks up by doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, or by accident. And I think that's when my whole career started to take another change,
Right.
honestly.
Now, also with DX, when you guys first started DX, is it true that Hunter was pretty much against Billy and Brian coming into DX?
I believe so.